March has officially arrived, but just because March has officially arrived, and maybe that's towards our counterparts of college basketball a little bit more, doesn't mean that there isn't things happening behind the scenes, in the college football landscape as well. Welcome back to the Any Given Saturday podcast, where anything can happen on any given Saturday. Just ask your favorite 30-point team that ended up taking that L anyways. You hate to see that, by the way, if that is your favorite team. We are here early in the month of March, and that does mean that, well, one, spring is around the corner. We got warmer days ahead of us, which means spring football is also around the corner. Not just for, the combination of the UFL, but also college football teams are having their spring practices as I speak on this podcast as of right now. I'm recording this on March 8th of 2024. We also have more things happening in this world of college football as well. Are we going to see finally the return of a Heisman Trophy to one of the greatest players of our modern time in Reggie Bush? Are we also on the verge of seeing a Super League being formed in college football as well? Are we ushering towards that era as we speak? Plus, are we also on the verge of having another installment of my program rankings? We have all of that and maybe a little bit more on this podcast tonight. But guys, with us being in this period of an extended period of time without having to go through actual college football games being played on the field, this is also a great time, to send me your questions and what's really burning at your heart right now. And it doesn't necessarily have to be college football related. So if you have like one of those questions for me, leave that down for me down in that comment section, and I'll get to it in a future podcast. I do try my best to read all of the comments that you leave for me down below. And while I'm thinking about what you could do down below, do a couple of things for me as well. Hit that like button and then also hit that subscribe button as well, because many of you that do watch this podcast are not even subscribed to the channel. And you're already here watching the content. So, to make it easier on yourself to actually watch these videos from this channel, just hit that subscribe button, baby. That's all I ask for you to do. Nothing too crazy. But without further ado, we got a little bit of drama happening in the NCAA landscape now, don't we? But we find ourselves, or at least potentially find ourselves, at an impasse where, we see the NCAA taking these L's in court, and we ask ourselves, do we now see a legitimate opportunity for Reggie Bush to get his Heisman Trophy back? And we have now seen additional pressure being placed on a different front. About a week ago, we actually saw one of the more notable Heisman winners from the 2010s, and Johnny Manziel. He put this tweet out. He said, after careful thought and consideration, he felt that he didn't want to attend these Heisman Trophy ceremonies until Reggie Bush received his trophy back. Now, we find ourselves at this impasse because if you guys remember, Reggie Bush, one of the best players of the 2000s, was part of those very memorable mid-2000 teams from USC, and he eventually had his Heisman Trophy revoked after he made it to the NFL because of some improper benefits that he took at the time. But now we find ourselves here in 2024, several years down the line. Now, several years down the line, you find not only the activation of NIL, but what we have also seen is that we have seen a place where the NCAA can't enforce transfer rules. The NCAA cannot enforce, what constitutes good NIL benefits or what's proper NIL benefits. So it begs the question, are we going to end up seeing a point of where will we see Reggie Bush get his Heisman Trophy back? Within my lifetime, I think it's more certain. I think certainly at some point in my lifetime, we will see Reggie Bush have his Heisman Trophy restored. I actually think in the near future, we could have that Heisman Trophy restored back to Reggie Bush. And here's why. So I want to take this back to the state of Ohio. And I know it seems a little bit all out in left field, but I want to make this point because I think, it's very linear to what I want to say, right? So, in the state of Ohio, what has recently happened is that, weed became legal here in the state of Ohio. There was a choice in whether, weed should be legalized or not. And the majority of folks in Ohio wanted that to be legalized. And so, what also happened as a result of that becoming effective was that for those people that were in prison or they were in jail because of having weed, not because they were driving under the influence of weed, but, they were driving and they got stopped and they happened to have weed on them. So instead of those folks continuing to have to be in prison and continuing to have to be in jail awaiting trial, perhaps, those folks were set free if they didn't have any other charges that would have kept them in jail or would have kept them in prison. Why? Because maybe what was illegal at the time of their alleged crimes now is legal. And it would make no sense to have somebody in jail or in prison for something where in 2024 is absolutely legal today, right? So it goes back to the Reggie Bush thing. What Reggie Bush did back when he was playing his college football at USC was illegal based on the bylaws of the NCAA. He took improper benefits, and as a result of that, he had to face the consequences of having those improper benefits by having his Heisman Trophy revoked. But in 2024, here we are. We now seen that NIL is an active thing, not only allowed in college athletics, but is at one of the very forefronts of college athletics. It is prevalent in college athletics at this very moment. So Reggie Bush, for lack of a better term, he's in jail or he's in prison by the NCAA because of things that he did 15, 20 years ago, but those things would no longer be considered illegal by today's college football landscape. Though that would be legal, and with that being legal, it opens the door for Reggie Bush to get his Heisman Trophy back. Now, before we even had some of these rulings that happened in the NCAA, the Heisman Trophy Committee, because it's different from the NCAA, they have came out in the past and said, listen, we would be happy to give Reggie Bush his Heisman Trophy back, but the NCAA has to restore his stats first. And the more that I thought about, at first I thought that that made sense because if there was no recognizable NCAA stats, there's nothing on a stat sheet that would back Reggie Bush earning and winning that Heisman Trophy. But we saw what he did on that field during his Heisman Trophy campaign. We know that this was a certified bad man. And for those of you that are a little bit on the younger side, I challenge you to go look at some Reggie Bush highlights back when he was at USC. Certified bad man. Look that up on YouTube. I beg you. And yet, we've seen the NCAA not able to really enforce these transfer rules. They really cannot enforce anything NIL related. So it begs the question, what is the Heisman Trophy Committee truly waiting on at this point? Because I feel like even if the Heisman Trophy Committee went and reinstated Reggie Bush's Heisman Trophy, and the NCAA necessarily didn't like it, at the same time, though, the NCAA is really not in this concrete position to where they could challenge that ruling, right? Because the president has already been set in previous weeks. We've already seen the president set to where, oh, by the state of Tennessee, by the state of Virginia, that NIL cannot be enforced by the NCAA. And what Reggie Bush did would be considered under those NIL provisions he really should has his Heisman Trophy ceremony back. So I applaud Johnny Manziel for taking this type of stance. I think it does send a message as one of the more memorable players from that 2010s decade. I thought it was something that was brave, because it is a huge opportunity to represent the Heisman Trophy. And Johnny Manziel himself, one of the most exciting players that we witnessed in the 2010s. So I applaud him for standing up for Reggie Bush. And I sincerely do hope that we do end up seeing the restoration of the Reggie Bush Heisman Trophy, because wholeheartedly, he absolutely does deserve it. I truly believe that. And I'm sure many of you that are watching this truly believe that as well. No question about it. But speaking of the NCAA falling apart right now, or at least it seems like the NCAA is falling apart, the NCAA might be falling off more than one way in one particular fashion. This is the NCAA potentially falling on multiple fronts. Now, if you haven't been living under a rock, we've seen throughout what some people like to throw the O word out. I don't use that over here. If you're looking for that O word to be utilized, you can go to a different channel to go ahead and do that. But we don't do that over here. At least I don't, right? What I've seen is many of these negotiations on the college football playoff. Many of you know we're going from a 4 to 12 team format. Now, there's more discussions after a few years of the 12-team format to extend it out to 14 teams. Well, not only are we possibly seeing 14 teams in college football playoff next time it does expand, 14 being an odd number, but that's besides the point. There's also a suggestion of the winner of the SEC and the winner of the Big Ten Conference getting not an automatic bid, no, not just that, but an automatic bye, and no other conference getting that. All the other conferences would need to play in the first round. SEC champion and the Big Ten champion would automatically get a chance to be in the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. Well, there was quite a bit of pushback, but it makes you wonder if there is a point where the SEC and the Big Ten, they're looking across their counterparts at the table saying that we tried to negotiate with y'all in good faith. It's not really good faith, but try to negotiate with y'all. And they end up going and forming their own Super League. They break away from the NCAA. And so, under that scenario, Andy Staples and Cole Kubnick actually got together and kind of talked this hypothetical through. What if the SEC and the Big Ten actually broke away from the NCAA? What could that possibly look like? So, what we ended up finding is we get this graphic from On Free Sports, and it has the College Football Super League, hypothetical, of course. And what we had was two super conferences of 24 teams each. Now, my very first reaction when I saw this was that I absolutely hated it. I actually think, like the sky is falling in terms of college football. It's not that I'm afraid of change. I'm not afraid of change at all. I am, however, afraid of change that is going to be detrimental to the overall game of college football, because just because you're making more money doesn't mean your product is better. The NFL, for example, is making more money than it has ever before, but the NFL product, on the other hand, that particular product has not necessarily improved in all aspects. Some would argue that certain aspects of the NFL has gotten worse, officiating always being a hot button discussion. So that was my first reaction, because I don't want to see the SEC and the Big Ten break away from the rest of the FBS, because those two conferences in particular, you can't tell the overarching college football story without those two conferences. And then I dug a little bit deeper into what those teams would be included in this hypothetical college football super league. And while I still wasn't a fan of it necessarily, it's not as bad as what I thought it was going to be. Now, let me go ahead and explain real fast. So, how it has it broken out is that the SEC and the Big Ten, they would be two super conferences. You would have two conferences of 24 teams, so you would have 48 teams total. And I'm sure through those 48 teams, they would have their own playoff system, their own rewards, yada, yada, yada. But I'm looking through this graphic that was put out by On Free Sports, and honestly, the vast majority of Power Four teams would be included in this. So it would, in a sense, create a clean break between the Power Four and what we have under the Group of Five structure. Now, it's not a completely clean break. There would be a few Power Four teams that would be left behind. Certainly, the West Coast would be grossly what's the word I'm looking for? Underrepresented under this Super League hypothetical. You only have 5 teams west of Texas in the Super League. So essentially, the entirety of the West Coast, with the exception of a few markets, would be cut off and brought out. But two surprising benefits that I think would come out of it is that, well, one, when we're talking about the national championship, just for the overall FBS version of college football, you have 134 teams that are in this same FBS division. But even though it may seem on paper, well, all 134 teams have a chance to win a national championship, that really isn't the case now, is it? If we're truly being honest with ourselves, in any given year, and this is us kind of being generous, there's really only 15 to 20 teams out there at the start of any given season that have any sort of realistic chance to not just compete for a college football playoff championship, but you're also talking about just getting into the original 14 playoff format. So you're really only looking at 15 to 20 teams that have an actual chance and maybe have those expectations where, they want to be in the college football playoff at the end of the year. They want to compete for a national championship. But for the majority of teams that are at the FBS level, that's not a realistic expectation. Many of the teams out there would be happy if, they just improved upon what they did on the previous season. They would be happy if they would make it into bowl season and play in some of the non-New Year's Six bowl games that are taking place every winter during, the Christmas holiday season. That's the reality for many of these programs, and that's particularly the case for the Group of Five. And it leads me to the other thing that I thought about in the Group of Five. If you end up having this breakaway, you could create something that I know many fans, particularly down at the Group of Five, would want in the first place. And that would be having your own Group of Five playoff. Now, I first heard this over on the Late Kick Show with Josh Pate, and he worded it pretty well. I don't know exactly how he said it, but the general idea was, okay, if you have like a 2021 Cincinnati, for example, that is truly good enough to be in your Final Four, they could participate in your college football playoff for, the FBS National Championship. But there's other Group of Five teams that have had spectacular seasons, but have not had the opportunity to go and play for that college football playoff, for that national championship. 2017 UCF is certainly one of the most notable cases during this college football playoff era. Liberty, probably some of those Liberty fans might feel the same way about how they had this undefeated season. They ended up winning the Conference USA. and yet they weren't even remotely close to being in that top four. They actually, I don't think they were even ranked by the College Football Playoff Committee until either after conference weekend or after the end of the regular season. So for many group of five teams, there's no path for them to be able to actually be in a position to compete for a college football playoff national championship. So for those teams, 2017 UCF, 2023 Liberty being two more recent examples, you could have your very own group of five playoff where you have, your four teams or however many teams you want to put in there. What you end up doing down there is, none of my business. I don't get to make any of those particular decisions, but the group of five could have their own playoff. And even if we never get to a point where we see a college football super league created, we never get to a point to where the SEC in the Big Ten completely breaks away from the NCAA and from the FBS structure. I still don't think, even though we are expanding to 12 teams and expanding out to 14 teams, I think the group of five having their own playoff still isn't that bad of an idea. Even with the 12 teams getting in, yes, there is a path for now at least one group of five teams to get in, thanks to the auto bid system. The auto bid system is of course, a discussion for another time. We're talking about over 60 teams essentially fighting for one spot. The only other way that you could see a group of five team get to a point where they could get in as an at-large is if, they do end up finishing undefeated or 11-1, but you can't just do that for one season. You have to have that type of high-level performance, and also you have to have that high-level performance for multiple years, at least 2 years. And then also in the year that you make that kind of run, you have to challenge yourself in non-conference play. That was exactly how Cincinnati was able to get into that college football playoff back in 2021. Back in 2020, they did end up going undefeated. They were invited to the Peach Bowl to play Georgia. And while Georgia ended up winning on a 50-yard field goal to end the game, Cincinnati was very much in a position to win the Peach Bowl against the Georgia Bulldogs. They had a legitimate opportunity to win that game. So they finished undefeated. They won the American, and they didn't win, but they had a competitive performance against Georgia. That was the backdrop leading into 2021. So Cincinnati was already on the radar at that time going into the 2021 season. Then in the 2021 season, they went undefeated again, but then they went and played Notre Dame on the road. Notre Dame finishing as a top 10 team in their own right that year, and they beat them on the road. And then they did what they were supposed to do in conference play. They won the American, they went undefeated. That was how Cincinnati got into the playoff. So, as you can see, when you're a group of five team and you're trying to do that for 2 years in a row, essentially go undefeated in the regular season for 2 years in a row, that's almost impossible to do. And it's even harder to do with what we have with the transfer portal, where your roster can legitimately be rated at any given moment, where some of your better group of five players, if they don't leave for the NFL, they end up going and transferring to bigger programs in what used to be the Power Five, going into the Power Four. So, unfortunately, for the group of five, is it possible in the 12-team format that they would go and play and have a legitimate shot at a national championship? Sure. But it's going to be harder to do that because, instead of trying to out scheme your opponents for 2 games, you're likely going to have to do it for 4. And that's a harder task. So even if the Super League doesn't happen, I would absolutely love to see a similar playoff format just for the group of 5. And it would also be fun to see for the group of 5 fans if they can decide on the field who is truly the best group of 5 program out there. Because while Liberty was the highest ranked group of five team, at least in terms of what the college football playoff committee said at the end of conference weekend. There's some other programs out there that, had some legitimate arguments. SMU, for example, James Madison being another one as well. It's an interesting thought experiment. And if we do have changes to the playoff, I would love to see a group of five playoff. Now, granted, if you make it to the top 12 of the bigger one, the group of five teams should go there. But for most of G5, that's not a realistic possibility. G5 playoff wouldn't be such a bad idea either. But we are closing in less than 6 months. We're now not even 6 months. We're probably 5.5 months away from actual college football being played against other teams. We're getting off the bad slope, and things are going to get progressively better. Things will certainly get progressively better. Now, with there being not many meaningful action happening on the field, like I said earlier in the pod, this is a great opportunity for you to go ahead, if you wanted to do this, ask me a question down below, man. It doesn't even have to be college football related. Now, college football might be my wheelhouse, but if you wanted to get to know me just a little bit better, just in general, go ahead and let me know down in the comment section down below. I'll be happy to, to answer that for you guys in a future podcast. And also, while I have your attention, do a couple of things for me. If you're enjoying this so far, make sure you go ahead, hit that like button, and hit that subscribe button as well if you have to be brand new. Not only does this ultimately grow the channel, but also hitting that like button does not only does it let me know that, hey, you like this podcast, but also in the same token, what this does for me is that it allows the YouTube algorithm to get this out to more college football fans like yourselves. And you see the size of our channel. It's no secret, we're not a big channel. And I'm not saying that we ever are a very big channel, but you could be an OG, you can be an A1 since day one. That's certainly something that can happen, but I can't do it without your help. So please, if you have that time and if you're legitimately enjoying it, do those two things. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button for me. I would truly appreciate that. So, with that being said, with that little bit of a self-advertising out of the way, what I wanted to do to close out tonight's pod is that I wanted to continue what I have been doing for the past couple of weeks. What we have been doing the last couple of weeks is that we have been through the process of displaying my FBS program rankings 1 through 134 going into the upcoming college football season, going into 2024. Now, couple of disclaimers. One, this is not me ranking the teams that are going to be on the field per se. This is ranking the overall program, so to speak, going into 2024. And how I ended up ranking these programs from 1 to 134 is that we went about doing it based off of a few factors. One, we went with on-field success. That is key, but winning against a Power 5 team and winning against a group of five or an FCS team is weighted differently. So I talked about that more in the very first episode when we ended up doing these rankings. So if you want to get more context, you could check that out down in the playlist. But we also account for a couple of other things as well. We also account for how is your talent acquisition? Where do you stand among your peers when it comes to high school ranking and when it comes down to utilizing that transfer portal as well? We get these rankings based off of 247 Sports. Plus, we also take into account how much stability and how much continuity is there in the head coaching position. What is the stability like at that head coaching position? And so we looked at that over a 5-year period from 2019 to going into 2024. And based off of that, this is how we came with those rankings. Last time out, we did 101 through 120. So today, we find ourselves in that top 100. And so, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into what we got going on at number 100. The team that just barely made it into the top 100. I have from the MAC, I got the boys from Northern Illinois. Now, Northern Illinois, they do have that continuity at that head coaching position. Thomas Hammock has been the head coach of Northern Illinois for the past 5 years. However, during his 5 year tenure at Northern Illinois, it has been a little bit on the inconsistent side. We've seen a year in which Northern Illinois nearly had a 10-win season, but we also seen NIU go completely winless as well. It's one of those things where you don't really know what you're going to get. Maybe we see a little bit more consistency going forward, but that does hold Northern Illinois back a little bit, so to speak. And plus, when it comes to their recruiting and their talent acquisition, they do find themselves consistently outside of the top 100 as well. So while they do have that head coaching continuity, which does help, those other two factors do hold them back a little bit more. And therefore, that's why I have NIU at 100. Quickly moving on, though, I have the Arkansas State Red Wolves coming in at number 99. Now, Arkansas State is not as consistent with its stability at the head coaching position. They had to bring in a brand new head coach in Butch Jones, and coming into last year, we were not sure if Butch Jones was going to survive this season, but Butch Jones does get Arkansas State to its very first bowl game since 2019, so this is a program that might be going in the right direction. 2 bowl appearances in 5 years doesn't necessarily help the cause, but, Arkansas State is improving, I think, under Butch Jones, which is good to see after he was made into a meme during the very early portions of the football season, where he allegedly was fake crying on the sideline after his team was getting absolutely raw dogged by Oklahoma, but that's a story for another time. Not only are they also recruiting in the top 100 consistently, though, they're almost recruiting in the top 90. So they're recruiting at a higher level than NIU, which allows their upside for on-field performance to be higher as well. So I have Arkansas State at 99. Keeping it down south, though, I want to continue to move on to number 98. How about the Mean Green of North Texas? And the Mean Green of North Texas, them boys they have a newer coach in Eric Morris. He just finished his first year as the head coach of North Texas. We also saw North Texas upgrade conferences. They were in the Conference USA from 2013 to 2022, but this past college football season, we did end up seeing North Texas in the American. They did almost make a bowl game from this American Conference, so North Texas does have a little bit of a higher profile now, which is good to see. They also are actually recruiting inside the top 90, unlike Arkansas State, who is barely outside of the top 90. That's how close it is. That is how close it is between these programs at times. It really does feel like they're splitting hairs at some moments. So North Texas, I do barely have ahead of Arkansas State, who comes in at number 98 for me. Now, going in at number 97, I got Western Michigan. The Broncos of Western Michigan, has had that continuity at head coach for the most part. Tim Lester has been around for quite a while, and while they haven't made a bowl game in the course of the last couple of years, what we have ended up seeing is, because they have more continuity at the head coaching position, and also because they are recruiting at a similar level to North Texas as well as Arkansas State, that's why I have Western Michigan ahead of both of these programs right now. So Western Michigan also going to be ahead of Arkansas State and ahead of North Texas. I got the Broncos at number 97. Meanwhile, at number 96, I got the Pirates of Eastern Carolina. Now, the Pirates of Eastern Carolina, another program that has had continuity at the head coach. They've had Mike Houston at the head coach of Eastern Carolina, and Mike Houston has had it pretty solid. He looked like he was turning his program well, had an 8-5 season in 2022, but he did take a major step back. We'll see if his ECU squad can bounce back. However, Eastern Carolina, not even accounting for last season, though, Eastern Carolina has recruited almost inside the top 80. That's accounting for high school recruiting and in the transfer portal. Plus, Mike Houston has been around at Eastern Carolina for quite some time. He is entering his 6th year as the head coach of Eastern Carolina. So, for those reasons, I did have ECU almost in my top 95. They come in at 96 there. However, I know that these really next four might create some controversy. It might create some angry comments in the comment section. I just ask that before you type it out in the comment section. I just need you to hear me out. Here we go. So I have Colorado at 95. I'm going to pause for dramatic effect. But here's why I have Colorado at 95. Yes, they have a lot of hype. They have a considerable amount of energy within the program. Those two things I certainly can't deny. They also get talent at a much higher level than the teams that I've previously mentioned. However, there are two things that hold it back. One, the on-field performance over the last 5 years. When we put together these rankings, for me, on-field success is king. So if you haven't really won very much in the past 5 years, you're not going to be very high on this list. In Colorado, they have not won more than 5 games since 2016. We've only accounted for on-field success from 2019 to last college football season. So within those 5 years, they've won at least 5 games one time. And even in that one time, they went 5-7. So they haven't finished above 500 as a team since 2016. Plus, it has been a relative revolving door for head coaches as well. Mel Tucker was there for just a year. Carl Dorrell was fired after 3 years. Deion Sanders is there now, and yes, Deion Sanders absolutely has significant energy for this team and with the program around it. But will that be sustained? Can Deion Sanders, get them to a point where they're starting to make bowl games? They're in the Big 12 now. We'll see if Deion Sanders can win at least 6 games and, start to turn that off the field hype into on-field success. There certainly is upside for Colorado to move up. Maybe next year when I'm doing this, Colorado could be much higher for all we know. And I could be eating my words. But until they prove it with their head coaching continuity and with their on-field success, I have Colorado down here at 95, at least until further notice. Stanford, on the other hand, I do have Stanford at 94. Now, Stanford has had some good moments over the years, just that it wasn't really recently that those good moments have happened. At least for Colorado has at least won 5 games in a relatively different period of time. Stanford can't even say that. Stanford, in the last 5 years, their highest win total was 4 games. And that's it. They have not won more than 4 games since 2018, where they had that long stretch of bowl games under, the latter portions of Jim Harbaugh, and now, and the majority of David Shaw. Speaking of David Shaw, though, David Shaw is no longer there. Troy Taylor is there. Troy Taylor looking to turn things around in year number 2. One saving grace for Stanford is that they actually acquire talent at a pretty high level, which is what you would expect from a Power 4 team. Stanford is actually inside the top 40. In the last 5 years, they've acquired talent at a higher ranking than Colorado. Now, if Deion Sanders continues his work, that is likely to change, but with that, I have Stanford at number 94 because that on-field success has ultimately held them back. Another team that has had its on-field success held back is the University of Nebraska. Nebraska has gone a while without significant on-field success. So Bo Pelini was fired in 2014 because, Nebraska fans and Nebraska boosters, they were not satisfied with what Bo Pelini has done, even though he's tracked at nearly double-digit win seasons his entire time there. But they found out quickly that sometimes that grass isn't greener on the other side now, has it? Since Bo Pelini got fired after 2014 season, they had one 9-win season. No double-digit win seasons, one 9-win season since 2015, and that was, in the 2016 season. Looking at the last five years, they have not been to a bowl game. Their best year, you could argue, is a tie between Scott Frost's 2019 campaign and his first year under Matt Rule. So the on-field success has not necessarily been there. The coaching continuity, we'll see. We'll see how long Matt Rule stays around. What does save Nebraska, though, is that Nebraska has recruited at a very high rate. Nebraska has recruited in the top 25 over the last 5 years. So the upside is there, the talent is there. They just got to put it together on the field, and they'll find themselves much higher. We'll see if Matt Rule can take kind of that breakout step here in the second year of the Matt Rule era. More to come on Nebraska, but for now, I do have them at number 93. But for number 92, I actually have one of the newer teams at the FBS level, and that is the James Madison Dukes. Now, for some James Madison fans, this could be seen as a slight of some sorts, but guys, I'm accounting for when James Madison was in the FCS for 3 of the 5 years that, we're doing this projection in terms of on-field success, because I weight wins differently, because not wins are all the same, right? That's why James Madison is probably a little bit lower. But in addition to that, what also holds James Madison back is that they have to recruit at a higher level. Even with FBS recruiting, even with the success that they've had on the field, their average recruiting class for the last 5 years has been in the 130s, actually closer to the 140s. So they're very at the very bottom of talent acquisition. They've been a really good development program, though. And Kurt Kennedy has proven that he is an FBS caliber coach, a Power 4 caliber coach. That's why he left to go to Indiana. Good luck to him over there. So James Madison does also have a new coach. Bob Chesney is there. He's coming from Holy Cross. He does not have any FBS coaching experience, at least as a head coach, but he's been very good everywhere he's went. He's coached Holy Cross at a very high level, led Holy Cross to 5 FCS playoff appearances in 6 years. They've also, he's also coached at the Division II level, led to multiple Division II appearances, a few years at the D3 level. He's seen it all, at least in the Northeast. Very excited to see what Bob Chesney can do. And I'm curious if that success that James Madison has started with, if that continues under Bob Chesney. But I will say this, I'm high on James Madison going forward, and I'm very confident that when we are doing these rankings again next year, that James Madison will easily be in that top 90, at least very much higher on this list. At least that's what I'm hoping for. Now, keeping it moving here at number 91, I got the Rainbow Warriors of Hawaii. Now, Hawaii has recruited at a much higher level than what James Madison has, but hasn't really shown it on-field results. They do have a 10-win season back in 2019, but after that, 5-win year in the COVID year, they missed bowl games in the last 3 years. They've also have turnover at the head coaching position. Timmy Chang is down there in his 3rd year. So 3 different coaches in 5 years. That's not a great look for say, but the recruiting does help Hawaii be ahead of James Madison and Hawaii is also trending in a positive direction. Up next, I got the Army Black Knights coming in up next, and Army comes in at number 90 in my rankings. The Army Black Knights, some would call this America's team. Now, they have the benefit of not being able to utilize the transfer portal because the academic requirements related to their academies, but they do have stability at the head coaching position. They have Jeff Monken there. Jeff Monken's been there for an extremely long time, has led Army to 5 different bowl games, one in which Army was able to win 4 of those 5 bowl games, 2 of those coming in the last 5 years. We do also see Army joining a conference for the first time since 2004. Army is joining the American Conference. They'll be with Navy as well. So Army going to be in a bigger conference. This is probably the biggest conference that Army has ever been in. They were briefly in Conference USA in the late 90s, early 2000s, but that did not hold water for long. Army is here. Army is now in the American. We do also see Army have that decent level of success. That's why they're at, this number 90 ranking. Up next, we got the Ohio Bobcats coming in at number 89. The Ohio Bobcats, for a long time, we saw Frank Solich be the head coach of the Ohio Bobcats. He did end up retiring after the COVID season. Ever since then, Tim Albin has been in charge, but going into year number 4 of the Tim Albin era, Ohio is humming along. It has hardly missed the beach. Now, the first season of Tim Albin's Ohio club was down horrendous, but after that, 2 double-digit win seasons in a row, went to bowl games, won said bowl games. That's a big boost for the guys at Ohio. Now, Ohio does not recruit very highly. They are outside of the top 100, but the on-field success is certainly there, more so than what we've seen at other schools. It's a solid program. It's a solid program in the group of 5. They're going to be here at number 89. At 88, though, is yet another group of 5 program in the Wyoming Cowboys. Now, the Wyoming Cowboys did see Craig Bohl recently retire. He was at Wyoming since 2014, but Craig Bohl is leaving Wyoming in a better place than what Craig Bohl started out with. In Craig Bohl's first couple of years, he went just 6-18, but the Wyoming administration stuck with him, and he's been able to really turn around ever since. We've seen Wyoming go to 4 bowl games in the last 5 years. They've won 3 of those 5 bowl games. They do have a new head coach. Jay Solvell is the new head coach of Wyoming. He's going to be a first-time head coach. Was on the staff for the last 4 years at Wyoming, so at least the Cowboy football players do know him pretty intimately. They recruit at actually the same level at Ohio. I had Wyoming's on-field success just a tad higher than Wyoming. Again, it's razor thin margins in terms of some of these rankings sometimes, and this is a perfect example of that. So that reason, I do have Wyoming at 88. At 87, I do have Buffalo. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a surprise considering Buffalo has only been to 1 bowl game in the last 3 years, but Buffalo was ranked in the top 25 as recently as 2020. And in the 3 of the last 5 years, they've been to bowl games and won those bowl games as well. So maybe falling a little bit on hard times. The Maurice Wingus era did not work out. Lance Leopold, after coaching there for a little bit, he's now at Kansas, but they do have a new head coach already. Pete Lambeau has taken over as the head coach of Buffalo. This will be the 3rd head coach Buffalo has had in the last 5 years. And Pete Lambeau has experience at the group of 5 level. He's coached at Ball State in the mid 2010s and did just fine at Ball State. Wasn't great, but he was okay. He was solid, not a liquid or a gas. Buffalo actually almost recruits inside the top 100, which is pretty good considering New York is not necessarily a talent-rich area. For football, it's more of a basketball type state, but Buffalo, a better program than I think what people realize. Up next, I do have Utah State at number 86. Utah State, another program that is a consistent player in bowl season. They've been to 4 bowl games in the last 5 seasons. They've had Blake Anderson handling things at Utah State going into year number 4. Just a good program. Just a good program with some high watermarks, such as an 11-3 season back in 2021 that saw Utah State ranked in that top 25. What does hold them back a little bit is that they don't have those conference championships in the Mountain West. Plus, what we have also seen is Utah State has traditionally recruited outside of the 110. So that is what holds Utah State back. Still a good program at 86. Speaking of quality programs in a group of 5, though, we got the Georgia State Panthers. The Georgia State Panthers do end up coming in at number 85. Now, at number 85, yes, Georgia State, when I first made these rankings, well, we ended up seeing Sean Elliott go and take an assistant job somewhere else. But Georgia State already has a new head coach. Del McGee is new head coach of Georgia State. We actually talked about him on the last podcast. We're actually feeling pretty good about Del McGee and what he could do at Georgia State. And Georgia State is in a pretty good spot. Sean Elliott did his thing for the Panthers, led them to 3 bowl games on the last 4 years. Just a good program in the Sun Belt. They do also have a decent job of recruiting. They recruit at a slightly higher rate than Utah State. Very close between Georgia State and Utah State, but I do have Georgia State at that number 85 spot. At number 84, I do have UAB, and UAB, led by their head coach, Trent Dilfer. Now, Trent Dilfer hasn't been, a great coach for, say, in the American, only 4-8 in his first year. But UAB, after they had their program discontinued for a few years, I mean, ever since UAB's program came back, it's been a good program. I mean, Bill Clark did his thing, and, Trent Dilfer is going to try to do his best to, keep it up. UAB is also recruiting inside the top 100 as well. So that's another thing to note. UAB has been in 3 bowl games in the last 5 seasons. But yeah, man, it's interesting to see what UAB becomes in the American Conference. Not a bad spot for a program that didn't even exist for much of the mid 2010s. Shout out to them. At number 83, though, I do have Marshall. Marshall coming at number 83. The Thundering Herd also been in those bowl game considerations. They've been a consistent player in bowl season, meaning bowl games in 7 consecutive years. That is amazing to see for a group of 5 program. Absolutely. They have a head coach in Charles Huff who's doing okay. He's going to be into year number 4 and has continued that streak for sure. Before that was Doc Holliday, who was the longtime head coach of Marshall. They've also have overseen a transition from Conference USA to the Sun Belt, the Sun Belt being a superior group of 5 product as of right now, and they recruit in the top 100 when it comes to their talent acquisition as well. So just a good program in the Sun Belt. A lot of competitive football happening in the Sun Belt. Also, a team that's been, interesting to watch is Florida Atlantic at number 82. Now, Florida Atlantic has been down the last few years, ever since the last Lane Kiffin season, one in which Lane Kiffin went and won double-digit games, won the Boca Raton Bowl. That has been great for Florida Atlantic. They haven't won 6 games or more since then. Willie Taggart was there for a few years. He ends up getting canned. And then Tom Herman is there. He actually was the head coach, or not head coach. He was the offensive coordinator at Ohio State when we saw Tom Herman win that national championship under Urban Meyer. He's here at Florida Atlantic. He's kind of been head coaching at multiple places, Houston, Texas, etc., etc. Florida Atlantic does not necessarily have that on-field success, obviously, and they don't really have coaching stability, but they recruit inside the top 85, and that's far better than what many of the group of 5 teams can boast for sure. We'll just see if that on-field success finally catches up so that Florida Atlantic can be higher. But for now, while they have the upside, they are at number 82. And then finally at number 81, I got the Rockets of Toledo. The Toledo Rockets are certainly one of the best programs in the MAC right now. Not the best program in the MAC, but they're certainly number 2. Toledo has really hit on his head coaches. Jason Candle has been there for a while, since 2016, has guided the Rockets to a very successful tenure, had Toledo ranked as high as number 23 in the AP poll, on his way to an 11-3 season, and Toledo has consistently finished as an above 500 team, and this has happened since 2010. So really just a standard of success at Toledo at this point. But before even Jason Campbell, they had Matt Campbell. Matt Campbell was the head coach of Toledo. He was there before he went to Iowa State. So they just know a thing or two about getting high quality head coaches in Toledo. They have the coaching stability. They also recruit inside the top 90, almost in the top 85. And of course, they have the on-field success to back it up. It's one of the best programs in the MAC. And I'm surprised as well. And this is what helps Toledo as well. Jason Candle had opportunities to coach in the Power 5 and has declined them thus far. So big get by Toledo to keep their head coach. And Toledo is one of the better programs in the group of 5. I have them at number 81 for this reason. But that's going to include another portion of these FBS rankings. We did 81 through 100. If you watched the first couple of parts, let me know down in the comments what has surprised you so far. Are you surprised to see certain teams, appearing already? Are you surprised that I have other programs that I haven't even mentioned a little bit higher than maybe what the average person would say? Certainly let me know down in that comment section. But with that being said, I hope you absolutely enjoyed this podcast here today. We have some great things in the work that maybe aren't ready to be brought out today, but they certainly will be brought out down the road. Maybe some record predictions that could be done for certain teams, working on record predictions for all 134 teams out in this, pre-spring football phase. Much more to come. And I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you made it through this entire thing, by the way, you are the real MVP. You are indeed an A1 since day one. And so you could show that appreciation even more by just doing a couple of things for me, baby. Just hit that like button so that you can let me know that, hey, you enjoyed this podcast. And also on top of that, if you're brand new to the channel, and I know many of you are, I've seen the analytics, vast majority of you, and I mean vast majority of you, have actually watched this but have not subscribed. So hit that subscribe button, so that's a lot easier for you guys to be able to get these videos in your feed, man. I would truly appreciate that from the bottom of my heart, so that you can be that A1 since day one. But with that being said, I'm your host, Jake. I'm going to get ready to sign off for tonight. I will see you guys next Saturday for the next Any Given Saturday podcast. Who knows what awaits us within that week? A lot happening in this, what some people like to use that O word for. Not here, not that guy. But with that being said, I am Jake, the host of Any Given Saturday. Hoping you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.